Ever been to a youth basketball game where one team sits back in a zone and dominates? It looks great on the scoreboard, but is it really helping players develop? Today, we're going to be talking about why coaches should stay away from zone defense at the youth level and what they should focus on instead. All right, welcome in everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're looking forward to having you with us today on this episode about zone defense at the youth level. My name is Alex Engel, and I'm here with my partner and co-host, Augie Johnston. I'm the girls basketball coach at Morro Bay High, and Augie is the boys basketball coach at Atascadero High School. So first things first, we're going to just kind of jump into the context here of zone defense at the youth level. What are some of the reasons that I guess I would say it's tempting for coaches to want to play zone defense at a youth level? You know, we see it all the time. So why is that? Why is zone so popular at younger ages?
Well, I think it's because zones obviously force deep shots. That's the number one thing they do. They kind of eliminate layups at the rim for the most part and force teams to take deep shots. And at the youth level, you know, people aren't shooting 40% as a team, or, you know, there's just a lot more poor shooting. So it's tempting, and there's a lot of other reasons too, but I would say that's probably one of the main things, and the first thing that comes to mind is like, kids can't shoot, so all you got to do is tell your players to get back and get into a 2-3 formation, and the other team's going to just shoot threes and give yourself a chance to win. I will just mention one other thing is like, you don't have to, like, man defense is hard to learn the concepts of man defense. That takes time, the instincts and the roles and that you're supposed to do and stuff takes time. So it's pretty easy to just tell kids to get into a 2-3 and it looks like you're playing defense when really you're not doing any really good defensive fundamentals. It's just still getting the job done by eliminating layups, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you've that's a great point there. And I think one key aspect you mentioned is that just because the other team's not scoring doesn't mean that you're teaching your kids how to play good defense. Like, those are two very different things. And oftentimes people get caught up in that, like, oh man, they only scored 4 points against us today. We're playing great defense. Well, not really. They're, you know, your kid's in third grade running a zone. Like you said, kids can't shoot that far yet. They don't have the offensive capability to, you know, to run a high-low action or to run some overload action to try and disrupt the zone. And so it just makes it really difficult for kids to be able to score on. And so I think sometimes things get misconstrued when we're talking about defense and good defensive principles versus just not being able to score. And I think that's where zone defense, or why it's popular, is because a lot of coaches see it and they're like, oh, we can win games. You know, it's going to get us easy wins. And we've, I think, come to a point, unfortunately, where a lot of people think winning at the youth level means development. And I strongly believe that winning at the youth level does not mean development. If it's being done the right way, then yeah. But if it's being done at the cost of long-term development, I think you're harming the kids more than you're helping them. And so, you know, I think that's definitely a big point of it. I think it also causes a lot of turnovers. Like, zones can cause a lot of turnovers. That's why people go to them, because they're like, they can disrupt the other team. Because again, I think players don't really know how to beat a zone most of the time at a younger age. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, it takes good passing to beat a zone, and I think at the youth level that's not common. You're more seeing players that can drive the ball, get to the basket, and take layups. And from what I've seen at the youth level, like, that's what kills you, right? When you start giving up layups, because the scores are like, you know, 16-14, and we're saying youth, we're talking about, like, you know, third grade to eighth grade, I guess, even though high school is youth basketball too, in a way. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you don't have to invest that much time to get decent at a zone. Like, I mean, if you're going to invest all your time, practice time, into offense, and that's what most coaches do, including myself, you know, not that I always want to do that, but anyways, you could invest 90% of your time into offense and 10% to putting out some kind of zone, and it'll get the job done at the youth level. Where if you're going to teach man-to-man at the youth level, like, okay, you're going to have to invest 50% of your practice time in order to develop a good man-to-man defense. But you know, we're here to argue that that's what will develop them into defensive players. And again, because of the fact that it's hard. Man defensive principles are hard because it's habit building, and it's not so clear cut as like zone, right? Where zone at the youth level, you're like, it's a 2-3, you're on the top. And so you'll see it, right? The fourth graders will play offense, they'll shoot a shot, they'll miss, the other team get the rebound, and they all just sprint back and they're perfectly in their spots. Where in man, you have to match up, you have to close out, you have to do all these different things, which I think takes more time.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an easier fix at the younger levels. And the higher you get, and we'll get into this more later, but the higher you get, the less effective I think it becomes, because as offensive players become better if you don't have good zone principles, right? But I don't want to get too much into that right now because that's part of the discussion later. So let's talk maybe some specifics here. How do you think that zone disrupts offensive just development in general? And let's say you can look at it from two perspectives. I mean, I guess you would say from the team that's playing against the zone, how do you think that stunts maybe their offensive ability? And then on the flip side, we can talk, how does it stunt your defensive ability as well as the team running the zone?
Yeah, as far as like stunting the other team's offensive development, like that sounds hard to explain, but I know what you mean by that. And it does because, and you see it at the girls level a lot. But like, imagine your boys team never seeing man defense and never getting to run their man offense. Then all they have to do, or all they ever get to do, is run zone offense. Then that is stunting their man offense development. So I would argue that, leagues that could put in a rule where they say, no zone allowed, you have to play man to man. Like, that's going to help both sides of the coin. It's going to help players defensively develop, and it's also going to help players offensively develop, because it's a lot harder to develop your man-to-man offensive game as well as your man-to-man defensive game, in my opinion. It takes more time, where against the zone, you're going to be getting, open shots, but I don't know how much development is happening there.
Yeah, and I think the hard, when I was saying that about how does it develop or stunt the other team's development on offense, it feels kind of weird, like you said, to say that, because I know what probably a lot of people are sitting here thinking, like, who cares? We're just trying to beat them, right? But at the end of the day, like, what are you coaching this youth level for, right? Like, are you coaching the youth level to develop these kids? If we as coaches as a whole have a bigger mindset and a bigger picture, like vision, right, of let's improve kids across the board, obviously we're going to particularly focus on our own kids. But if we want to improve basketball across the board, then that takes being able to sit there and say, look, like, zone is not good. It's not good for young kids to play. There's a time for it. And both of us know there's a time for it. We're not like anti-zone ever. I think that's not right either. But when you're doing it at such a young age, you're kind of doing a disservice to your kids and to the kids you're playing against, because you're selling out their development to me, in my opinion, to your own personal kind of gain of, like, whatever that is, whether that's promoting your program or maybe it's just your personal ego or whatever it is, to win, instead of focusing on, like, what's going to be good from the long term. Because yeah, you go to college, some teams run some zone, they may mix it up in and out, but every team knows how to play man. And if you cannot guard somebody, like, you can't play college basketball. If you can't guard somebody realistically well at a good varsity level, you probably can't play high school basketball, Obviously, the higher level you go, the harder it gets. And do you still see zones? You do. But is that all they run and they don't do anything else? No. Like, you've got to be able to stay in front of your man. And I don't think you learn those skills sitting in a zone all the time, And the sooner you can teach those skills, the longer they have to practice them. That's the reality.
Yeah, and again, to me, it's about man-to-man is harder to learn, So if you're starting with zone, then I think you're starting incorrectly. I think where you can run zone and where it makes a lot of sense is you have a team, you've been coaching them for a year, 2 years maybe, you've been focusing 50% on man-to-man defense, you've been focusing 50% on offense, maybe a little press or whatever here and there. But, now it's time to add the zone. Now, okay, look, we have this team. How can we level up our play and win more games and develop them even more? Well, let's introduce zone. Let's show these kids what a zone is. Let's show them the slides for a 2-3 or whatever the zone is. And I think that's okay. And I think that's good, because you do need to prepare them for all aspects, because, like, on the girls' side, they might go play for Cabrillo High and they're going to run a 3-2 zone the whole entire season. They're going to sit in it. So there is that. And even at the college level, there's Syracuse, schools that only run zone. I will say that it's not as common. I would say most teams run mostly man stuff. But still, you want to prepare them to be able to play man defense, and you can't do that unless you start with man defense, focus on man defense, and spend a ton of time, because that's hard. Where zone, I think, is like, can be an afterthought, and you can put together a pretty good zone. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I know, like, every year when I have my varsity team, who I've coached for a long time, and I'm all right, here we go, today we're finally putting in our 2-3 zone defense. These are the slides. These are this. It's like, dude, these guys know that. Like, they know exactly what the top guys do, and they've known that since they were before freshman year even, because it's just not that hard. But, maybe our zone defense is not that great, maybe because, we don't spend time on it either. But that's my thing. It's just like the man stuff is so hard. I mean, it's so hard to learn those kind of rotations. It's like mind-boggling, for some kids.
Yeah, and I think kind of 2 points there that you talked about. One, I think there's a difference between running zone and running a good zone, and like knowing how to run the like you said, how to bump a player off in the zone and make sure that you are and it's not rotating in that sense, but just you're moving with the ball and like you're in the right spot. You're not just literally standing. Most of the time we talk about like a 2-3 or a 3-2. Rarely does it look like an actual 2-3 or a 3-2. Like the ball should make the zone morph and change, and it might look like a 2-3 that's kind of on its side or a 3-2 that's on its side because players are shifting and moving. That's one thing, but I feel like I see so many times what you talk about is just bad zone, and even at the high school level, like I see it quite a bit. Like you said, on the girls' side, we get it way more than the boys do. So many teams run zone, and I'm like, this is such a bad zone. Like you're just hoping your defense is basically hope that we're so bad on offense that you're going to get the rebound. Like you're not actually stopping us from getting shots. We took 100 shots and 95 out of the 100 were wide open. And so it's like if we're hitting, you have zero chance to beat us. And if we're not hitting, then you've got a chance because, then we're missing some shots. You might get some rebounds. But again, is that really going to happen? If you're a good high school team, you're probably going to make most of those shots. And then again, when you move on to that next level, you're definitely going to be, every college team is going to have some shooters that can knock shots down. So it's just one of those things that I think you're just kind of gambling, and it feels, I'm going to be honest, it feels kind of lazy to me when people are doing that. They're just sitting in the zone and being lazy instead of, you're right. It takes time to coach and teach man-to-man defense, like at a young age. I mean, I know when we work with like our club girls, they'll be playing the same man-to-man defense for 2, 3, 4 years, and I'm still doing like, all right, shell drill rotations or some version of that and learn how to rotate and make sure, we're in help side, and I'm still yelling at them. But then they do get it. And by the time, and it may take a couple of years or however long it takes, but when they finally get it, then we can play. And, once they get to the high school level, say at a higher level, they can actually guard somebody, and I'm not saying we're like the greatest defensive team in the world or anything, but my kids can guard. Like they can guard, they can rotate, they know how to communicate, they understand those things. And I would bet that 70% or 80% of the teams that I see like don't play man and don't know how to do that, even in the high school level. And if we're talking youth level, I mean, it's got to be in the 90s. Like 90% or more of the teams do not play man. And so I just think that's too much. It should be the other way. It should be like 10% play zone and 90 play man. And I feel like we've gone completely the opposite direction. I know this is a little bit of I don't want to say tangent, but just maybe an anecdote or example. I have a friend, we both have, I'm sure, many friends that play overseas or from Europe, and they play in the systems out there. And I have a couple that are in Belgium, and they've told me, like, zone is banned. Like, you are not allowed to run zone at the youth level. That is just not allowed. And it's, like, pretty much countrywide. Like, the whole basketball development in Belgium is like, no, there's no zone. Now, I'm taking that from hearsay, so I guess I could be wrong with that. But I've heard that from quite a few guys that played in other countries, and they're like, we don't allow them to play zone because we want to teach fundamentals and the basics. And, you've heard, like, before Kobe passed, he talked about how AAU is kind of ruining basketball here and how in Europe they run their club system so differently. And I feel like you hear that over and over, but in the U.S. we haven't adopted that yet.
Yeah, no, I think that they understand the both sides of the coin, right? One team plays zone, and that means the other team has to play zone offense, right? And that hurts. It's like double-edged sword of like ruining basketball for your community, So it is a good idea, I think, to start with man, because what happens with zone is like players, first of all, they don't learn the ability to match up. Okay, so matching up at the youth level is hard, and a lot of times, it takes time for players to learn that. So with zone, you're not learning that. A lot of times players, they don't guard one-on-one in the zone because there's so much help that's just built in, right? So they're not able to stay in front of their man. They're not pressuring the ball. They're kind of just putting their hands up, playing passing lanes, running around, gambling a lot, where, not focusing on or not even worrying about help side. Like you could be 3 passes away in zone and be guarding the guy on the point, or a guy in the high post. And where in man, you have to have that help side under the basket, and then you also have to have the help to helper, which is hard to develop. And with zone, maybe I'm not a zone guy, so I don't know, so I'm not so deep into it, but it just seems like there's just too much help built in, and you're just putting your biggest guy right in the middle of the paint, and that guy's not doing much besides guarding a triangle, and that's not going to develop that player at all to guard on the perimeter when he has to guard a ball screen or all those other kind of actions, right? I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's just you're not going to get better defensively individually running zone.
Right. And I think that's the biggest question here. One of the biggest questions is, what is the overall goal of youth sports? And I would even factor in high school into that. I know high school, especially varsity, is a little bit different because 99% of players, their career ends at varsity. So that is the end of the road. Also, on top of that, varsity teams are playing for league championships, CIF championships, state championships. Like there's something actually on the line. I would argue anything below that, JV and down, including freshman JV high school basketball, the games are, I don't want to say they're meaningless, but the wins and losses really do not matter. Like it's not like you're chasing this huge goal that everyone is like really, really cares about. Like, okay, your JV team goes 25-0 and wins league. Like, does anyone really care after like a year? Probably not. But if your varsity team goes 25-0 and wins league and puts a banner up and then wins CIF, like, yeah, that's a big deal, right? That's like a big event in the community. Everyone cares about that type of stuff. And so I think up until that point, it really has to be about how do we develop kids to get them to be high level players at that level. And beyond, you want to give them an opportunity to play beyond. We know most kids will not play beyond, but if you don't give them the ability to have a chance, then you're stunting their growth, and I think that's something that we want to try to avoid as much as possible as a community of coaches. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that though on the other end, because of the fact that 90%, 99% of people don't get to college, it's more like, holistically developing the whole player. Like you want to teach them how to step on a basketball court in any country, in any location, and be able to play defense and play man-to-man defense. And if they've never played help side, then they're not going to be able to do that very well. Where if they, have been developed great man-to-man defense, they can go play anywhere and they can be good in pickup and they can not frustrate their teammates. They can get picked up, right? And, oh, yeah, we want him. And to me, that's I always come back to that because, like, I can hang my hat on that. Like, I don't know if I can hang my hat on, like, getting guys to the next level. Like, I'll tell you what, I'll continue to study the game and do everything I can to develop our players into the best possible basketball players that they can possibly be so that they can play the game for the rest of their lives. But, yeah, and so man-to-man defense, I guess, is part of that too, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess that's another point that I think is somewhat unique to basketball. I mean, there are some other sports that are like that, but basketball is kind of unique that after high school, there are actually a lot of opportunities to continue playing in a recreational level. I know there's rec soccer, and softball is another probably pretty big one, at least out here in California. I would say softball and basketball, but those are probably the biggest too. Like there are other sports, but they're not as big. It's not as easy to get them organized. Not as many people still play. But you go to a random pickup court at 3:00 on a Thursday, and like there's 15 to 20 guys that show up, and they show up every Thursday, or you go at noon in the summertime to the rec center, and there's 30 guys that show up, and it's like there's a community that's behind that. That again, like basketball can be something you play for your whole life, and it's just something that's easier, I think, to get into and to continue. I mean, how many guys do we see when we play pickup that they've never played basketball before, really? And they're like, yeah, I just kind of got into it last year or two, and then they end up falling in love with it, and they're adults playing basketball their whole lives. And then kind of continue that argument is like, how often do you walk into a pickup court and then the guy's like, all right, guys, we're running 2-3 zone today. Nobody's doing that. Like you got to be able to guard somebody. Like it is what it is. And so I just think even for that long-term view of basketball, let's say we're talking not as competitively, you're right. Like it's zone is not included in that. It's a part of it, but it's not the main way of defending in basketball.
I wanted to add one more thing too. Like we're talking about like people are running zone so that they win more games, and it's not about that. It's about development. But let's be honest, you can win more games playing man-to-man defense, right? I mean, it's an argument to be made. I mean, some guys stand on zone, but like from what I see, the best teams are not sitting in the zone the whole time. They might sprinkle zone in, and maybe they play, I've played a whole game in zone before, at varsity level. I've done it. But I would say that we're a good team because we play pressure defense, man-to-man defense, where in zone you can trap and stuff and you can try to pressure and stuff, but like typically zone defense is more passive and you're letting the ball move around, where in man, like you can like strap up another team and lock them down and win because of that, and win championships because of that too. And like I remember when I first started coaching at the varsity level, I was more of a contain guy. I was like, we got to contain, force mid-rangers, contested mid-rangers, no layups at the rim. That was, and then I totally changed to more like all-out pressure, like that kind of stuff. And it just gives you, to me, it gave us another weapon. Like it won us games. Where like the contain. I never felt like it actually won us games, but there was definitely games where like, oh, we just smacked that team by 30 because of our pressure defense. So I would say that it's just a longer play. Like we keep saying, it's harder to develop. So if you are a youth coach and you're running zone right now, like if you're willing to invest a little bit more time and stick with it, like you will be a better team than you would be 2 years from now just sticking with the 2-3.
I agree 100%. And I'll say it even equally or more strongly, is man-to-man teams, like the highest level man-to-man teams, are better than zone teams. Like I don't think it's even an argument, to be honest. You look at all the best teams, they're generally, right? Yeah, someone can go out there and find your random Syracuse, I'm sure, that won a national championship 20 years ago, and use that. But if you want to look at the data overall, like the best teams, NBA, college, high school, they're teams that have great players that can lock down in man-to-man defense. And it makes it difficult, right? And I would say even the teams that don't win the championships, just the other really competitive teams, most of them are strong man-to-man defensive teams. So I agree. Your long-term, you really want to be great, you really want to be elite, get out of zone. Like go play man, struggle through the few years or whatever it is of learning it, and then become a team that people are afraid to play against, because everybody knows you walk into the gym, certain teams are like, damn, like they're going to pick us up 94 feet. They're going to just be on our ass the whole game. Players are going to be playing hard. They're going to be in you. And like those teams are the ones who are like, damn, dude, I don't want to face that team today. Like nobody comes in and is like, oh man, they're going to sit back into 2-3 and let us pass wherever we want. And like, I'm really afraid of that. Like, okay, I could have an off shooting night, but that's really it. That it's not intimidating to play against a passive zone. That's my thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. I will say that zones do give a bad team a chance to beat a good team, I think. Like it could be an equalizer. I mean, like when do you use it? When we use it, it's like when we feel like, oh no, there's no way we can guard these guys. Their man offense is elite. Individually as players, they are elite. No matter how much help we throw at them, it's not going to work. We're just going to sit in the zone and pray that we can beat them and they have an off shooting night and that we're able to get there to contest those threes, and it's the wrong guy shooting the three, and it allows, I think, bad teams to beat good teams. So with that said, it does freak me out when I'm watching film on a team we're about to play and I'm like, all right, here we go. They're going to sit in it the whole game. And so we got one practice to prepare. Here we go. We're going into practice. We're going to review all of our zone stuff. We're going to, and then you start that game. I can remember like one or two games specifically in my past, and we're getting wide open threes. We're just moving the ball. They're wide open, but we're not making them, and we end up losing. So I will say that.
Yeah, but that's scary. Like I would say, you're not wrong. I do know what you're talking about, but I think that's it's different because it's not them causing you to fail. It's you just not. Like, you're just not making your shots because you're just not making your shots. That is different than a team that's like, I can't advance the ball up the court. I can't get in my offense. Like, they are so good defensively. They're just pressuring us everywhere. You know what I mean? Both can be scary. I think maybe the scariness of the zone is you just don't know what you're going to get from your players. But that's not them taking something away from you. It's just you having an off night where like a good man team can take your whole team and like take the offense away. And that's intimidating, like that's powerful. And to be fair, I know we're crapping on zone right now. So for anyone that's still listening, like, yes, we have absolutely used zone to win games. And I do think you should teach your kids zone at a certain age. One, because they need to know how to play against it offensively. But two, you do roll it out every once in a while. I won a state playoff game and a semifinal to go to the CIF championship a couple years ago. Both teams were terrible 3-point shooting teams. Very athletic, straight to the rim, crashed the boards hard. And I was like, we're just going to sit in the zone. We're big and lanky. We're going to sit in the zone. And they shot like a combined 3 for like 50 in those two games from 3. And we won both games by 20, and it was absolutely the right call. And I credit the zone for that 100%. But then there've been, in that championship, for an example, we played another team that was not as good from the 3-point line. Statistically, they were better drivers. So we're like, all right, we're going to try the zone again. It got us here. Let's see if we can try it again. And then they just caught fire. And we're down 25 to like 5, in the first quarter. And it's like, well, there it is. There's the CIF championship. That's it. Game's over in the first 10 minutes. And yeah, okay, maybe the same thing would have happened if we played man, but it's like we had to bait them into taking shots, and they took them and they hit them. And that's the problem with zone, is you're not guaranteeing that you're stopping them. You're just somewhat hoping that you can make them make dumb mistakes or take bad shots. But if they get good looks, like, you're just crossing your fingers, right? And I don't love that on defense of like, let me hope that we can get a stop. I want to be able to be like, no, we're just going to stay in front and get that stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why we always start in man. We no matter what, it's been very, I can't even really think of a time where we just came out in the zone and stayed in it, but we always start in man, and then, we'll sprinkle a little zone in there to see what their offense looks like. And if it looks bad, then we'll be like, all right, haha, we got you guys. But I like to see if we can stop them in man first, because you can watch all the film in the world and then be like, oh, we got to zone them. They have no shooters. And then all of a sudden they come out and fresh legs right off of warm-ups. Bam, 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 a couple threes. Like, that's always my fear. So I like to fill it out with a little man to start. But, sometimes they can you can go man, they get up, 8 points in the first quarter, end of the first quarter, something, and then you end up losing. It's just, that's what it is. You try zone and they win by 9, So, but yeah, I think it's like, I think of teams like Cal Poly Pomona. They've been running 1-3-1 forever. They recruit for it. They get the lanky guys. It's all they do, and they're a very good D2 program. And I support them in that, because I think they're not a 5th grade team who's taken the easy way out of not having to teach defense, and that's why they're running the 1-3-1. They're running the 1-3-1 because they think it's going to win them games, and it's the right call for them, and it's, I don't know, a secret weapon for them, right? So I think it's okay for teams to go all zone at the varsity level. I would say even the high school level. Like, if you are building a program and you're like, we're going to be a 1-3-1 team, our freshman, JV, varsity, or we're going all in on 1-3-1 forever, like, I support that. But I would say that if they do get to the next level, and if they do go play pickup when they're older, that's not what's best for their development. But I think that's your call as a varsity coach, and I don't criticize anybody for that. It's just when you see it at the real youth levels, 3rd grade through 8th grade, like, they got to learn man-to-man first.
Yeah, I think most of this, as we're talking about this, we've said, yeah, we've used zone before, right, in high school, but I bet you neither of us have played zone, like you said, with our clubs at the real youth level, 8th grade down, right? I've never played a zone. I'm sure you haven't either, and I think that's really where this argument is standing on its legs the most. Yeah, you could argue high school. I have mixed feelings on that. I don't totally agree with you. I even think in high school, I think a lot of times it's questionable when teams are just playing as zone the whole time, especially when the team's not that great. And so again, I'm like, dude, just teach them. If you taught them how to play man, they'd actually be better. But I would say there's definitely more gray area for that compared to the youth levels, where I'm like, no, like, it's just to stop running zone, just let them play man. I guess one question is, do you, like, for myself, we, with our club stuff, we will sit down with the parents a couple times a year, and when we're laying out what the season's going to look like, we will tell them straight up, like, look, here's what this program is about. We're about player development and playing man to man. So we may not win every game because of that. Like, we're going to potentially play a team that's going to play zone in 5th grade, and our girls are struggling against that, but we're going to still stick to man. And you just have to be willing to understand that in the long term, this is better for their development and growth. Have you ever had conversations like that with your own parents and players?
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's a constant conversation that we have. I mean, more so recently than in the past, because we just kind of started over again and got new club kids in the door. They have 1 season under their belt, 1 short season. Now they're starting their 2nd. So it's like, I mean, I remember when you and I started Pass First way back in the day, I mean, it was tough to win games, and we were playing man to man. And so we're in that mode right now where I'm telling parents, like, don't worry about the wins and losses right now, and especially in club, when you might take a group of 3rd and 4th graders and go play an all 5th grade team that has 1 4th grader or something on it, where it's the wild, wild west out there sometimes. It's like, and so, yeah, I mean, that is a conversation that we have, and I do know that we lose games sometimes because we just play man-to-man defense and the other team's just in the 2-3, and we have to play zone offense the whole time, and we end up losing by a few points. And I'm like, I know if they had played man, we would have got face cuts, backdoor cuts, drive open layups, and we end up losing by a couple points. But yeah, I think that's a important thing for parents to know because most don't know that. They don't know anything about kind of the stuff we're talking about right now. They just look if we win or lose, and they care about that at that age too.
Yeah, and I would say, to any parents that are listening to this, if you are wondering like, okay, well, what should I look for? Winning and losing, as we said earlier in the episode, it maybe has a small factors to certain times on development, but a lot of the times it's not 100% what's going on. Like how it's not that winning and losing doesn't matter. It's how are you winning, right? And how are you losing? Like, are you doing things the right way and they're not winning games? Okay, then I think probably that's still a good place for you to be. Where on the flip side, if they're doing everything wrong, but they're winning games, just like you said, because they're doing gimmicky stuff or zone or whatever it is, then that may not be the best place for your kid to develop. And so that's something to consider and to be patient with and understand that nobody cares who wins the fifth grade, Central Coast Splash tournament. Like there's not a single person that cares. Yes, your kids care in the moment that little shiny trophy looks really cool. Guess what? You know how many shiny trophies I have in some box somewhere in my garage that I've never looked at and I don't give a crap about? Like all of us that have played club sports or youth sports at some point won at least one or two of those, and we don't care about them. We care about that stuff as you get older. And, again, the stakes get higher. You get to high school, you get to those bigger things. Yeah, then it really matters. But most of that stuff, it's just a piece of plastic to make you feel good for like 10 minutes and then you move on. And the community at large, the schools, the programs, that stuff is not really that important. It's about how are they developing to eventually get to that next level.
Yeah, and the important thing too is like I'll disagree a little bit because like we do want to win games. Like it's for the experience of the kid, right? It's a better experience for sure when you're winning games, right? But the whole reason we're doing all this youth development and stuff is because we want to win games in high school, right? That's why we're doing it. We're not here to do it to win games there. We care about them getting really good and putting together competitive high school programs. But the experience, when you're in the fifth grade and sixth grade and you want to win games, we want to win games. But like you can't hang your hat on that. Like you could play really well and you could lose. You could play really bad and you could win, right? So like the gauge should be that. Like are we winning games that we should win? Our team, if we play really well and we lose because the team has a bunch of fifth graders and we're in fourth grade, but we played a good game and, we took good shots and we hustled and we did good defense, then you can be good with that, and you can say, this is a great program. They're playing the right way. But if you're not doing that, if you're playing poorly and you're beating a really bad team, then it's like, you shouldn't celebrate that. Right? If you're the fifth grade team beating a fourth grade team, then you shouldn't celebrate that. So it's all just about, are you playing the right way? Are you playing well? And then if that's the case, wins and losses don't really matter. But like to me, I want to win the games that I feel like we should win. Like that's it. Like I don't need to go beat some team, whatever, and go put us in the lowest bracket so we can just run through everyone. But I want to go play teams that we're on the equal playing field with, and I want to beat them. And that's all that, then I think that's successful. When you start losing teams that you should beat, that's when you're doing something wrong.
Sure. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm sitting here saying winning doesn't matter at all, because I think it's okay at a young age too to teach them winning does matter, right? But again, it's like how and at what cost, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing there is that you just don't want to get in a situation where your long-term goals and morals are thrown out the window to win something early, Should you try and compete and win? Yeah. I mean, I know every coach is going to try to win every game. Like games were mismatched, games were even, games that were the better team. Like I'm going to try and win all of them within the still the, what am I looking for? Not the confines, but like the standards that we're trying to set in the long term, or the approach that we're trying to teach them of like, here's how you play the game the right way, like you can't lose focus of that and trade all that out for wins. I mean, I know there are leagues where they're like, like some of the rec leagues. I know in club they don't do this, but in rec they're like, we don't even keep score because we want everyone to have fun. And I'm like, okay, that to me is too much. Like it's okay for kids to lose. Like there's nothing wrong with kids losing, in first grade. I don't care. Like in first grade, it's okay for kids to lose. They need to learn how to deal with that. I don't believe in like, yeah, like it's okay. They're not going to fall apart.
They're not in any danger for losing a rec basketball game. Like,
yeah, right, exactly.
Good for them, Jeez.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like I don't want to make it sound like I'm on that end where I'm like, oh, don't even keep score. Like, no, like keep score, let them lose, let them win, it's fine. But just let's keep in mind the bigger picture here. What are we trying to teach them? I think that's kind of my main point with that. So I know we got a little off topic there, but I know that stuff kind of still ties into the idea of zone and why we're, both of us are kind of in agreement that at the youth level, it's not necessarily the best tool. So maybe the last thing here before we get on out of here is, are there any specific drills or like things that you try to put in with, let's say you get a new group of kids or you just have kids that are newer to the game. What do you try to put in to say, okay, we're going to teach them some man principles. Here are some options of things we can do to help them get the basics.
Yeah, like I guess kind of the most innovative and like my favorite drill to teach is like it teaches help side and help the helper. And I think that's the hardest part in man-to-man defense is getting your kids to be head under rim. We call it fire help, but it's just, help side and then the help the helper. So the way that we do is 2-on-2. So we put one person under the basket. We put one person kind of, I guess, in tandem with them, like almost at the free throw line. And then we put two guards on the other side. So you have 2-on-2, and then the ball's on the other wing, and the coach will drive it in. The player under the basket will play help side. The coach will then kick it to the corner. The other player will help the helper, and then they throw a one more maybe, and then the fire help guy will then X out and close out. And that teaches help at the basket and help the helper, and it's a fun drill because once the ball's in, it's live 2-on-2, and the defense is at a little bit of a disadvantage because the person that's Xing out on that one more has got to close out. So you can teach closeouts and then, gap help if they drive it that way. And it's a great drill. It's 2-on-2. You put one under the basket, one at the free throw line. That's the defense. And then you make a two-side with somebody in the corner, somebody on the wing, drive and kick that thing, make them help and help the helper. That's my favorite drill.
Okay, and I'm gonna, because I know we've been getting a lot of coaches, can you put a whiteboard up here because we don't know, you're talking too abstract, which I totally get. I was drawing this up as we were going through it. So you said you got your X's here. I'm gonna put this on the screen for anybody that's looking here. You got your X's there, defense, is that correct? And then you've got your offense. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And so you said the ball on the opposite wing.
On the opposite wing, so over here.
Coach, yep, right there.
Okay, so we got a coach here. I'm going to put this coach over here. Okay, so coach has got the ball. Okay, we're going to use our black circle as coach has got the ball here. Okay, and then from here, you said they're just basically baseline drive. Okay, so from here, we're going baseline drive. Okay, and now what do we got?
And now that bottom player will help, right? That's the help, right? Help side right there. And then you kick it to the corner. Off that help, you kick it to the corner. And then that top player has to rotate onto that player. That's the help the helper.
Okay, so we got our drive here. Help steps up. Baseline pass. Okay, this is the dot here to the pass. So the ball's now in the corner. And we've got this top guy dropping down into help.
Yep, and then
or help the helper, I should say.
That offensive player has to throw one more. And then the help defense is now rotating right back onto that with a closeout.
So the help defense being the top guy or this guy that came over?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's fully Xing out.
Yep, full X out with a closeout right there, and then it's just live.
I know that was probably a little crude, but figured we can give you guys a visual. So if some of you wondering, okay, what does this look like? That's what Coach Augie does to run his help the helper. Is that just the name of the drill? What do you call it?
Yeah, I think we call it 2-on-2 help the helper, man. And that's gold right there. Because not only is that a good drill that really drives home, like if you're 2 passes away, you're in help, but it's live, which is fun. It's fun. Like how many shell drills are fun? It's not really a shell drill, but it's part of it. And yeah, you can work on that closeout. That's a really tough closeout. And then offensively, they can work on, like 0.5 decision making. Where on that one more, they can shoot it, drive it, move it, whatever. So great drill.
That's a good one. I'm going to have to steal that one from you. So, okay, awesome. Well, I think that's good because, now we talked zone, but now they got a nugget of like, hey, what can I do on the flip side for man? And I think there's so many different drills you can do. I mean, most people know the traditional shell. We've talked before about defensive workups that I do, which is somewhat similar to that, a little different, but kind of similar of the 2-on-2 smaller side game idea. And in the future, we can maybe do an episode just on breaking down some of those drills. I think that would be kind of cool. But yeah, any last thoughts or anything on just what we talked about today with zone defense at the youth level?
I guess my last thought is if you are going to do zone at the youth level or whatever, make sure you're teaching closeouts. Make sure you're teaching, on-ball defense. Make sure you're teaching deny defense. Make sure you're teaching post defense. Make sure you're teaching just actual parts of real defense. Don't just say, you're in a 2-3, these are your spots. You guard this area, you guard this area, you guard this area. That's not helping anybody. And I would just recommend, if you are a zone coach at the youth level right now, consider going man. And when you do it, just have your players definitely lock in on help side, but be all out pressure. And I think you'll eventually be like, okay, I'm going to go away from zone and let's go man. That's my last point there.
All right. I think that's well said. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you guys so much for following and watching along with us. If you stayed this far into the episode, we really appreciate it. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button so you can stay up to date when we release new episodes. If you're listening on an audio platform, you can follow along with us there as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.